Hello, this is Miriam Rosales, and this is our final for EDUU 688, and I'm going to share my slides. So for the final, there was a couple things that we talked about. And one of the things that I chose was student behaviors because I feel very passionate about student behaviors. And the title of my presentation for EDUU 681 is Student Behaviors, Causes, Educational Systems, and Strategies. And the description is I'm going to be talking about a comparison of the United States, China, and India. These are my table of contents. The introduction, what I will cover in this presentation, educational systems, how the educational structure is going to be a comparison of US, China, and India. And then some policies and practices that I'm also going to be focusing on, what the US, China, and India are intending to do, what they're currently doing, and things that they've already been doing to help with behaviors. We're going to cover a little bit of some research. What does the research show us about student behaviors? Some challenges that were faced by the US, China, and India in the educational systems, and then some supports. What can teachers do to support these students that have some behaviors? So in this presentation, I will be discussing students' behavior, comparing the educational system of the United States, China, and India, and what factors may be at play when it comes to students' behaviors, what school systems, policymakers, and teachers are doing to improve this issue, and I will be discussing a few strategies of things teachers can do to address the issue. So behaviors in schools, the underlying concerns. There are many concerns that school systems face all over the world when it comes to education. But disruptive behaviors are one major concern that has been addressed over the years. Teachers have addressed these concerns, asking school districts, administrators, and policymakers for assistance and support when it comes to classroom management and promoting positive behaviors in the classrooms. These students' behaviors are not just a concern that we faced here in the United States, but it is also addressed in many other countries. So what are we doing to address these behaviors in the classrooms? Although there has been several attempts to build positive classroom environments, there is still a lot more to consider when it comes to student behaviors. There has been a lot of research done based on behaviors in the classrooms. Policymakers, teachers, and parents have constantly have discussions about students' behaviors. Some of the attempts include educational codes, policies, regulation codes, and moral conducts that have been established within the school systems. But these issues on how we can support students with behaviors is an ongoing discussion. Before we can find possible solutions to some of these behaviors, we first need to consider what factors influence students' behaviors and what can we do to prevent these behaviors in our classrooms. So before we can explore these factors and the reasons why students misbehave in the classrooms, let's first take a look at how the education system works and how it is structured in the United States in comparison with China and India. So in the United States, the educational structure is mainly categorized in three different categories. The first is the primary school. There are two main structures in the United States. So the primary and the secondary school. The students attend these schools for a number of 12 years. A child begins their education careers at the age of 6 in the primary school, which is also known as the elementary schools. But most students attend elementary school for 5 to 6 years. These include kindergarten through 6th grade. Then they go into secondary school, which consists of two programs, junior high, or sometimes called middle school or high school. Middle school is from 7th to 8th grade, and high school is from 9th to 12th grade. When a child completes the 12th grade, they graduate from school and obtain a high school diploma. Then it's up to them if they want to pursue into higher education, which may be a college or a university. In China, the educational structure is a bit differently. It is divided into three categories. Basic education, which includes preschool. It may include students of 3 years of age. In primary education, which starts also at the age of 6, just like in the United States. And they complete 6 years of basic education and they go into secondary education for another 6 years. Secondary education has two categories: academic secondary education and specialized vocational technical secondary education. And academic education is, in comparison to the United States, kind of like junior, which consists of 3 years, and seniors, which is middle school, up to 3 years. If junior school graduates wish to pursue higher education, they must take a locally administered entrance exam, which they have the option to continue in a senior middle school or enter a vocational middle school. This training usually can take up to 2 to 4 years. A senior middle school graduate may choose to go into a university, but must take a national higher education entrance exam. The higher education consists of two more categories. They may do a 4-year or 5-year undergrad degree or a 3-year academic degree qualification. This includes a diploma or certificate on both academic and vocational subjects. They may continue at a university to pursue a postgraduate or doctorate degree. In India, similarly to China and the US, children in India can begin their school education at the age of 6, which is normally kindergarten. However, there are 4 levels in structure. Pre-primary, which is not part of the formal education system, but can start at an age of 3, which is kind of like preschool or daycare. And then the lower primary, ages 6 to 10, upper primary, 11 to 12, and high, which is 13 through 15. Higher secondary, 17 to 18, and there is also some amount of specializations at a higher secondary level, kind of like what we see in China's educational structure. So interesting facts and comparisons that I found when I conducted some of the research is that part of the education system in India is that students must learn 3 different languages. And this is English, Hindu, and their mother tongue. Some of the similarities that we may see between China and India are that national leaders view education as important development on both countries, begin building their education system during the late 1940s. That's when they started getting really involved in structure. Their structure became a little bit different. However, higher education and secondary education is where we see the disconnection between China and India. Although both countries focused on illiteracy in the early years of education, China has outperformed India in the primary and secondary education. However, India has many advantages in higher education. So we see older students with higher education in India versus China. So some of the policies and practices, there has been several attempts to implement policies and practices in education systems based on behaviors and challenges. So some of the, for example, like the Chinese education and society has come up with 8 sections of the regulations on primary and secondary school moral education work. If it focuses on elementary and middle school students to promote responsible citizens by providing guidance in morals and values. These articles are broken down into 8 categories, such as general principles, management responsibilities, the ideology in moral character class, and the ideology in politics class, conventional education, team development and management, materials guarantees, so they focused on if they have the proper materials to support these students, school, families, and society, and any other additional items. These help the educational system ensure that they provide the equity the students need to become good citizens. Therefore, it helps students behave positively in schools. So some of the laws that we see in the United States, for example, is the willful defiance law, which was created to amend Section 48900 and to annul Section Code 48901.1 of the Educational Code. This law helps ensure that students in the public sector to ensure that schools focus on interventions and assistance relating students' discipline. So they want to make sure that they're supporting these students with some of the behaviors. India's attempt is that the result also showed, so what they did is they conducted several research. One of them that I focused on was they studied 750 primary school students they were studied and they focused on public and private sectors. So this involved parents and teachers that were interviewed. They conducted some questionnaires. They asked the families about their background, how their pregnancy was. They did a very specific research, and they found that 65 of the 750 had behaviors. And the results showed that some of the factors that played a role in association with behavior problems in children included ecological factors such as conjugal, family, of domestic violence, parenting styles such as children being punished or physically harmed when disobedient. And then they also found that children coming from divorced families or an absent parent and children coming from parents of families show poor response to misbehaving. That's how they realized that these factors played a big role on children misbehaving in the classrooms. So what are the challenges that teachers face when supporting students with behaviors? Behavior difficulties, lack of routine, communication, not having the proper training and resources, not having enough support for administration or school officials. And also they realized that parent involvement was another factor. That was another research that was conducted in China. And funds to adequate support the students and families of students with challenging behavior. So where are those funds coming and what are they being used for? So supporting students and families, how can we support these students and families as teachers? Building positive relationships using model positive behaviors. We need to make sure we set clear expectations, practice coping skills, praise good behaviors instead of focusing on the challenging behaviors. So not necessarily ignoring them, but focusing more on the behaviors that you want to see within the students. Self-regulation and emotions, so focusing a lot on showing the students some skills to regulate their emotions, promote empathy on students, and then family and community engagement. That's a big one. We want to make sure that we involve the families in the community as a whole. And that's all I have. Thank you very much. I'm signing off. These are some of the references. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I enjoyed doing all the research. Thank you. Have a good night.